So I've spent a little time working on what to do for next steps. And I've been faced with a couple of other opportunities to investigate before deciding that the whole engine has to be replaced. On the drive home, it seemed pretty fatalistic that the blower was leaking through the blower seals and that either the block was cracked or that the engine head gasket was failing. And so I got home and I ended up spending the weekend. Monday morning, I picked up the phone and I called Gene Russell, who I've bought a lot of parts from and gotten some really good advice from. And Gene looked at the video that I sent him of the grayish liquid coming out of the crank breather, and he is questioning if it's in fact the gasket at all, which would be phenomenal news. And here's a couple of questions that he asked, which I didn't really think about. One is he asked between the first time we had the engine fired up in our part one of the videos and the second time when we went back, had it gotten really cold? And it did. It snowed, it got down to about 9 degrees. The previous owner, it's currently located, Bobby, had told me that he had drained the radiator fluid. And that it measured at 30 degrees. So it got colder than what the radiator fluid or the coolant level could accommodate. The second part about this, I guess they asked me, is when we had the overflow tank, or basically the radiator storage tank, open, was there a lot of air or blowing coming out of it? And we did open it, and there was not a lot of pressure, meaning there weren't a lot of engine gases working their way up into the cooling system. And after he heard those two things, he said there's a very common problem that happens, and he is suggesting that I definitely investigate this before getting into a full-blown head replacement or what have you. So apparently when the engine freezes, the weakest link is the copper gaskets where the injector seats in the engine and in the head itself, actually. So the head has, of course, rockers, and it's got the injectors. And the injectors rest on a copper tube that goes down into the top of the head where it does its job. And that seat is a copper seat. Now, in order to replace it, you have to do basically a head rebuild. But his suggestion is that's the weak link. If something freezes, that the injectors are actually going to unseat. And so his suggestion was to take each injector off, clean it up, clean the copper up a bit, and then torque it back down. And normally it's a 25-pound torque. That's the specs on it. He suggested going an extra 10 pounds to 35 pounds. He seemed to think that that would reseat those injectors in such a way that if that's really what the problem was, that coolant was getting through and into the engine through the injector tubes, that would resolve the problem. And he was fairly confident. The second suggestion that he made was to use basically a stop leak solution. And he gave me the name of a brand that he really likes and has had success with. And the way he kind of phrased it, I would get 10,000 miles out of it before. In other words, we're not fixing it, we're band-aiding it, and we're getting it back to Indianapolis where we can, get on to other things. It's currently parked in this guy's front yard, and so I want to get it out of Snyder, Texas. I want to get it back so that I don't have to drive 22 hours every time I want to work on it. So right now, that's kind of what I'm investigating. Blower seals. They actually have a blower seal, but there's an entire blower kit that you can purchase. The other option is to replace the whole blower is actually not that expensive. $350 for a brand new rebuilt blower, which given the condition of that one, that's probably the best bet, is to just swap the blower out with a new one. That will resolve all of that black oil that was coming out from underneath the bus. And the other side would be to try this injector thing, change the oil. If that doesn't work, put some stop leak in there, run it. I asked him about the radiator. The radiator is a very expensive thing, and the last thing you want to do is start putting things in there that's going to disrupt the radiator. And he said if we leave the radiator, we'll be fine. And so that's kind of where we're going right now. That's my next steps, is to go down with a new blower, swap the blower, try those two things, and see if we can't just get it home. And then we can decide, you know, do we replace the gasket? Is it a cracked head because of whatever happened in the past? And we don't have to know that just to get it back to Indianapolis. So hopefully that'll be enough of a remedy, and that's probably going to be the next path that I take. And so we're starting to prepare. I don't know what Tyler's schedule is. I'm certainly not going to do this by myself. I did talk to Patrick, who was in the first video, about his availability, and he might be able to come down. So we'll see. If Tyler is available, then great. Swapping out a blower is it's a pretty big thing. Patrick has done it successfully. So if Tyler's not available, then Patrick might be able to help me too. And so that's a detail we're still working out. But there may be some hope yet for not having to replace the engine. And that was another thing that Gene had said, because I mentioned the red block and how Greyhound used to paint the last block red. And he said, much more likely a lot of dump trucks, the engines were painted red for dump trucks, and that it's an engine that came out of a different vehicle, and the engine was painted red. He said that those Greyhound red block scenarios, he said that engine would have been swapped out long ago by now. He said that they're pretty rare to come across one that has a red block that's truly an engine can't be rebuilt. He thinks it's just an engine out of a different type of vehicle that happened to be painted red. So we'll see kind of both of those. There should be a tag on the engine that explains kind of where the specs are. We never did find that, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means we didn't find it. And we'll go hunt for that and see if there's any information on, kind of where the engine is in it, the block is in its life, and its ability to be rebuilt. So that's kind of where we are right now. With my other project, the 4101 project, I'm waiting for the springs to get back and get that buttoned up, and so that's something else that I'm working on as well right now. So that's just a bit of an update as to kind of where things are going.